Good morning, my friends. Again, we're glad that you're with us as we spend some time together on this cloudy Sunday morning and looking into God's Word. Hopefully we can learn some things together and profit from our time together. You know, I remember years ago, my wife and I went to, had this little mini cruise trip from Florida over to the Bahamas, and we were there for a couple days, and then we came back, and we got into our hotel room, and it must have been in the evening, and I looked and I saw this cockroach in there. Well, I killed a couple of the cockroaches. I didn't want to say anything to my wife, you know, and have her looking all over the place for these cockroaches. And we managed to get through the first night and then, you know, do some sightseeing the next day and so forth. But the next night, I believe it was the next night, and she saw a cockroach in the bathroom. Well, I killed that cockroach, and then I don't know if there was a couple of more. They came out, but anyway, I went down to the desk. I guess it really wasn't down, it was all on the same floor, but I went to the main office there and says, you got some spray stuff or something? We've got some cockroaches in our room. And I got this stuff and was reading the directions, said spray along the baseboards. Well, I sprayed along these baseboards with this stuff and they came alive. There was hundreds of these cockroaches coming out, and I got this wooden hanger and I'm killing these things, and I just left them all over the room. It was our last night there anyway, but not very pleasant, all right? But I read this story this week, and it reminds me of that time when we had lots of bugs in our room. But there's this a businessman apparently, and he'd been in a room, his hotel room, and he found a lot of bugs in his room, and he was very perturbed about that, and he complained to the management, and later he wrote a letter to the company. And a while after getting that letter, he received another letter back from the president of the company, and the letter said this on it. It said, "We are humiliated that a man of your integrity, a man of your reputation, a man of your importance in the community should have had this experience in one of our hotels. We are deeply sorry." It made the man feel somewhat better, and as he folded the letter up and he went to put it back in the envelope, he noticed there was another little slip of paper that clearly was not supposed to be there, but it was in the bottom of the envelope, and the little note was in the president's handwriting, and it said, "Give this guy the bug letter." You know, is that what you would call really feeling sorry for the guy? No, not at all, you know. And what does it mean to have true empathy? Okay, at first it looked like this hotel guy was giving him some real empathy, but clearly it was not. But what does it mean to have true empathy, true feelings of putting yourself in that other person? You know that little I don't know what you call it. Maybe they call it a meme nowadays, but where it says, you know, to walk a mile in another man's shoes. You know, and to actually, most people's shoes aren't going to fit me, but what I mean here is you know, to put yourself in that other person's life situation, to imagine yourself there and how would it feel and how to respond to that person. That's empathy, all right? And how easy is it for us to put ourselves in someone else's shoes, to put ourselves in someone else's place, you know? Or we you know, a lot of people find it a lot easier just to criticize and say bad things about that individual, or be like the story that Jesus talked about the Good Samaritan. You remember what happened with the Good Samaritan? There was, first of all, the priest came by. And what did the priest do? The priest saw the situation of this man who had let me back up a little bit. This guy was going on a journey, and some people robbed him, and they beat him up, and they threw him in the ditch. All right? And the first one to walk by, according to the story, as Jesus is saying, and I believe it's a parable, but at any rate, as he mentions this, the first one to come by is a priest. And what does a priest do? Priest looks at the man, and it says that he passes by on the other side. It's like it's so easy for us just to ignore, all right, and see a problem, you know, maybe. So the reactions quite common are either to criticize or to ignore and just well, you know, I wouldn't do that, you know, and I'd never be caught alive doing something like that. And the priest walks along and he sees the guy and he makes his way over to the other side of the road and he passes by. And a Levite comes by, does exactly the same thing. He sees the guy, and he walks by on the other side. And it seems that Jesus picked these people because they would be the people that should be, we all should be, but these are the people that should be, at least in their culture, these would be the ones that would automatically should help, all right? But they didn't, all right? But how is that with us? Is it easier for us, here's my question, is it easier for us to criticize or easier for us to ignore the problem that someone else is having, or we do the harder thing and empathize with that individual and help that individual? You know, some people would say, and this is common, that my problem is bigger than their problem. You know, they're having a big issue, but you know what? I've got bigger problems than they do. And that's a very common thing, all right? For people to think, well, you know, that's such a big deal. They can deal with that themselves. And I'm dealing with huge issues. You know, is my problem bigger than yours? Let's consider this morning, as we spend some time in God's Word, let's consider Jesus, all right? Not me, but Jesus. Take your Bibles, come with me again as we look into Mark chapter 14. We're working our way through the book of Mark, and we're almost at the end. Mark chapter 14, we're going to look at 10 verses this morning, starting in verse number 32. Okay, give you another second here to find it. Mark 14, starting in verse 32. And they came to a place which was named Gethsemane. Okay, now let me just back up before we get into this, just so you understand. Jesus has already come into Jerusalem. It's Passover time. He has had the Last Supper with his disciples. He has washed their feet. He has told them many things in John chapter 14, 15, 16, 17, all the stuff that had gone on there, and he's challenged them. Remember also that Jesus, he predicted that one of his disciples was about to betray him, and they questioned who that was, and he even told Peter, he said, Peter, you are going to deny me 3 times tonight, and Peter vehemently affirmed that he was not going to do that. Problem is he did. We'll get to that later. But as they come into the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus did the Last Supper, they sang a hymn, they left, and all these other things had happened that before they got to the Garden of Gethsemane. So here we are in verse number 32. And they came to a place which was named Gethsemane, and he saith to his disciples, sit ye here while I shall pray. 11 of the disciples were there, okay? Judas was gone, but Jesus takes 3 verses. Verse number 33. And he taketh with him Peter, James, and John, and began to be sore amazed and very heavy. You know, we read a lot about Peter, and we read a lot about John. But we don't read a lot about James, but he was one of what we would call, if we're going to give it a name, like the inner 3 that Jesus had. You know, although there's not a lot written, he obviously had a special place, all right, in those 3. Peter, James, and John got to see Jesus transfigured as well. And we see here that he took those 3 away. Just as a little side note also, James was the first disciple to die, all right, martyred for the Lord. All right, but anyway, moving on here. He began to be sore amazed and to be very heavy. See the situation that Jesus is in here. And and he saith unto them, my soul is exceeding sorrowful unto death. Tarry ye here and watch. And he went forward a little and fell on the ground and prayed that if it were possible, the hour might pass from him. And he said, Abba, Father, all things are possible unto thee. Take away this cup from me. Nevertheless, not what I will, but what thou wilt. And he cometh and findeth them sleeping, and saith unto Peter, Simon, sleepest thou? Couldst not thou watch 1 hour? Watch ye and pray, lest ye enter into temptation. The spirit truly is ready, but the flesh is weak. And again he went away, and prayed, and spake the same words. And when he returned, he found them asleep again, for their eyes were heavy. Neither wist they what to answer him. And he cometh the 3rd time, and saith unto them, Sleep on now, and take your rest. It is enough. The hour is come. Behold, the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise up, let us go. Lo, he that betrayeth me is at hand. It's important for us to have a clear understanding of just what Jesus is going through here. All right, is Jesus afraid of dying? The death is pending there. He knows it's going to happen tomorrow. All right, is Jesus afraid of dying? No, Jesus is not afraid of dying. Keep your finger in Mark. Look over with me. Spit my words out. Too early in the morning. John chapter 10. Okay, verse number 18 gives you a little idea about Jesus and his own pending death. He says in John 10:18, no man taketh it, talking about his life, no man taketh it from me, but I lay it down of myself. I have power to lay it down, I have power to take it again. This commandment have I received of my Father. Does that sound like someone who's afraid of death? He has all power over death. He is not afraid of dying. All right? Back in, and you can come back, you left your finger in Mark 14, so flip back to Mark 14, verse number 28. This backs up a little bit from what we just read, but here's Jesus making another indication of what it's like for him to die. He says, but after that I am risen, I will go before you into Galilee. He's already telling me, oh yeah, I'm going to die, but when I rise again, there's no fear of Jesus dying here. Jesus has no fear of dying. He knows, without a doubt, that he has power over death. And he can raise himself back up, and that's what he's going to do. Very much unlike us, all right? So this is Jesus talking. Is Jesus afraid of dying? Absolutely not. He was more confident that death meant nothing to him, okay? Totally confident, more than confident. Was he afraid of the suffering? No, he was not afraid of the suffering either. It was what was pending for him on the cross, all right? What was pending for him? Take a look in your Bibles. Again, stick your finger in there, stick a marker in there, because we're coming back to Mark 14. But come with me, if you will, to 2 Corinthians chapter 5 and verse number 21. 2 Corinthians 5, verse 21 gives us another indication of what Jesus knew and what was pending, what was going to happen to him. This is what brought him great distress, all right? 2 Corinthians, chapter 5, verse 21, for he hath made us to be, let me start over again. For he hath made him to be sin for us, who knew no sin, that we might be made the righteousness of God in him. Jesus was going to be made sin. Jesus, holy God for eternity past, eternity future, but for all eternity, he has been holy, and he is going to take that sin upon him. All right? Hebrews chapter 4 and verse 15. For we have not a high priest which cannot be touched with the feeling of our infirmities, but was in all points tempted like as we are, yet without sin. Jesus had never had sin, never done sin. It is impossible for Jesus to sin. It is entirely against his character. He is holy, all right? Holy and pure. But here he is about to, before this night is ended, he's going to be taken away. As you see here, as we finish, those were already coming to take him away, and he is going to go on the cross, not afraid of the dying, not afraid of the suffering, but what he is dreading is having this sin put on him, all right, who knew no sin. Galatians chapter 3 and verse 13, it says, Christ hath redeemed us from the curse of the law, being made a curse for us. For it is written, cursed is everyone that hangeth on the tree. All right, and he's made a curse, becomes the curse for us. Guilty of everything that we are guilty. He takes that guilt upon himself. Having committed no sin ever, having been pure and holy forever, he takes this on himself. Jesus, who is all God, all holy, forever, is made a curse for us. He's going through so much here, okay? We see as it goes on, more that's here. We see in John chapter 10 and verse 30. I'll just read the verse for you, okay? It just says, I and my Father are one. Here's another point of what's happened here. One of the results of taking on our sin, taking on our curse. He says here, I and my Father are one. John chapter 17 and verse 22. Just bear with me on this point for a moment here. John 17:22, it says, "And the glory which thou gavest me, I have given them, that they may be one, even as we are one." Jesus and God are one, all right? They are always been together, always been in great communion with one another. They are one in purpose, one in holiness, one in power, all right? But you know what's going to happen? If I skip forward in Mark chapter 15, verse 34, it says, "And at the 9th hour Jesus cried with a loud voice, saying, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani," which is being interpreted, my God, why hast thou forsaken me?" They are one. They have been united for eternity. And God the Father turns away from Jesus, his Son, forsakes him to there on the cross, puts on that sin on him. There is that momentary separation. May be the wrong word to use here, but when Jesus takes that sin it's like he's being forsaken. That's what he says here. Why have you forsaken me? All right. This is what Jesus is dreading. All right. That separation and communion that he's had with his Father forever, and to have that evil, vile sin placed upon him that you and I have done. All right. This is the agony that he knows he's about to face. How much agony is there? You know, look at verse in Luke chapters. It's only mentioned in Luke. It's interesting. All right. And I'll tell you why I believe that it's only in Luke, as it recounts this passage that we're looking at in Mark chapter 14 in the Garden of Gethsemane. All right, in Luke's account of this, it says in Luke 22, verse 14, he says, "And being in agony, he prayed more earnestly." Look what Jesus is here doing, all right? It's just not just a burden on him. He's in agony, all right? He's in agony. I don't know if you've ever been in agony. You know, maybe, you know, some people never have to have that, never have suffered agony, excruciation, okay? "And being in agony, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat were, as it were, great drops of blood falling down upon the ground." This is a medical, Luke is a doctor, all right? And it's interesting. That's why I think that Luke mentions this part it jumps out at him as he's as a doctor. There is a thing that happens. It's called hematodrosis, all right? It's documented. It is a medical thing, and under extreme, I can say it 4 more times if I can get it all the way to there, okay? But extreme stress, all right? What happens is there's little capillaries that burst in sweat glands, and it is an emotional thing that happens, and then the blood goes into your sweat. And it ends up, and here he had great drops of blood falling to the ground. He's bleeding through his sweat glands. They're everywhere, all right? And there's blood coming as his great drops of blood falling to the ground. That's how much agony Jesus is in. That's how much emotional stress this is causing him, knowing that he has to take on our sin. He's already limited himself to a body, taking where he was omnipresent before. now he's limiting himself down to one little body for 33 years, and some, 33 and a half years, right in that neighborhood, in order to come to do what he's going to do. And now he's just in absolute agony, knowing that he's going to take on Steve Taylor's sin. Pure, holy Jesus Christ going to take on Steve Taylor's sin, and it is tearing him up. That's where Jesus is, all right? It's important to understand what Jesus is going through. Could we ever go through what he is going through? I've sweat lots of times. I've been in hot fires. You come out and you are soaked, but it's not blood. That's how much agony Jesus is in, all right? It's important to understand so we can see what Jesus is doing here in the situation that he is in, that we will never be in. I don't know anybody who's ever sweat blood before other than my Lord. It does happen. There are people that has happened, but just imagine the place that Jesus is in. It's important to understand that as we move forward here. And he had taken with him the inner three, all right? Verse 33, back in Mark 14. Never take your finger out of there while I'm talking. And he taketh with him Peter and James and John, and began to be sore amazed and to be very heavy. And he saith unto them, my soul is exceeding sorrowful unto death. Tarry ye here and watch. Tarry here and watch. And he comes back to them after he's gone for a little bit. He's left, brings the 11 in there, takes 3 out of there, so he leaves 8 are kind of in one spot in the Garden of Gethsemane. And I got to spend some time in the Garden of Gethsemane. It was a special place, all right, when we went over to Israel there back in 2019. But he leaves the 8, one's gone, collecting his 30 pieces of silver, all right, and he's on his way back, but those 8 are there. These 3 are off a little bit closer, and Jesus goes off by himself to spend this time in prayer, and he comes back to them in verse 37. And he cometh and findeth them sleeping, and saith unto Peter, Simon, why sleepest thou? Couldest thou not watch 1 hour? Why does he center out Peter? Why does he center out Peter? He is warning Peter, who had just denied Jesus, that denied that what Jesus was saying, that he was going to deny Jesus. Sorry, kind of get my words all straight here. And he'd said, there's no way that I'm going to deny you. And Jesus is pointing something out to him, and this is not Jesus giving an I told you so. This is Jesus coming to him and warning Peter, trying to affirm to Peter, to show Peter, you are weak, okay? You have weakness. You have a fallibility here. You couldn't watch and pray with me for 1 hour. You couldn't do that. And you think, and it's not mentioned here, but this is why I believe that Jesus is doing in centering out Peter. Look at what you are, and you think that you're not going to deny me, and he's doing this. He's showing him where his confidence should be, okay? And his confidence should lie not in himself. Peter is relying upon himself not to deny Jesus, all right? And here's Jesus showing, look, your confidence is in the wrong place, Peter. Your confidence needs to be in God. That's where your confidence needs to do. And Jesus is doing this. He's warning him out of compassion. Peter, you're going to fall tonight. You're going to deny me tonight. It's going to tear Peter up. He goes out and he weeps bitterly after he does this. And here's Jesus. Look what Jesus is going through. And here he is warning Peter. Peter, this is what's coming. You need to put your reliance upon God, not in yourself. Jesus goes away again. He comes back. The second comes back the third time. He finds them sleeping. Look at verse 41. And he cometh a third time and saith unto them, Sleep on now and take your rest. It is enough. The hour is come. Behold, the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Is Jesus being sarcastic with them? Is he saying, oh yeah, go ahead and sleep, see what I'm going through? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Jesus recognizes what they are. These are people. These are fallible people. They're weak. They're putting their trust in the wrong place, and they're exhausted. And he is not coming at them in sarcasm. Jesus doesn't do that. All right. Regardless of the situation, Jesus cared deeply for his disciples. Regardless of what he himself was going through, to the point where he's sweating blood, he cares for his friends. He cares for his disciples. Their weakness is not being able to stay awake, and he pled with them the first time. But he did not berate them the second and third time. Look, I already told you once. Stay awake and pray. That's not what Jesus was doing, all right? He had compassion on their weakness in spite of his own fate, in spite of what he faced. How much genuine compassion do we have? How much genuine empathy are we able to put out there? Look at what the example we need to follow is not Steve Taylor. The example we need to follow is Jesus Christ. We see what he is going through, and yet here he is caring for his disciples. What is Jesus about to go through? And he's not worried is probably the wrong word. Concerned. He's concerned about what's going to happen to Peter, and what is going to happen to Peter that night. What are you going to go through? That moment when Jesus and Peter make eye contact, right after that rooster does his last cock-a-doodle-doo, and Peter has denied Jesus the third time. The heartbreak that Peter's going to feel is what Jesus is feeling for him, because that is the empathy. You know, how much are we willing to set ourselves aside in our situations for someone else? How much more can we understand what Jesus did for us when he faced what he faced alone? He asked for his friends, he asked for his three guys that they would come and they would pray with him because of what he was going to go through. We see that when Jesus was tempted in the wilderness, angels came after and they ministered to him. I don't see that anywhere in the Garden of Gethsemane. I see where when the soldiers come and they're going to take Jesus away, and Peter whips out his sword and does what he's going to do with it, and Jesus says, "Don't you think I could call my Father and he would send me legions of angels?" But they don't come with him here in the garden. He's alone. And yet, facing this dilemma alone, he has great compassion for his disciples. With the prospect of God the Father forsaking him while he took on our sin, his friends who he asked to pray for him couldn't stay awake and do one thing for him. Verse 37, we see there he says, "Couldst not thou watch 1 hour?" But if we look at what he says, more of the quote, in Matthew chapter 26 and verse 40, exact same account here again, Jesus in the garden. He says, "Could you not watch with me 1 hour? Could you not be with me in my time of need for 1 hour?" And they could not. But there's Jesus showing compassion, even when it was for their benefit. Like even when it was for their benefit that this rebuke came. Why? Look at verse 38. "Watch ye and pray lest ye enter into temptation. The spirit truly is ready, but the flesh is weak." Jesus is warning them here. What? For his benefit? No. For the benefit of the disciples. Look, you need to pray that God will strengthen you. You need to have your reliance upon God. Don't be sleeping at this particular time. There's lots of time to sleep. This isn't it. You need to be praying because I know you want to do what's right, but without God, you're going to fail and you're going to fall into temptation. This is a time when you need to pray. That's what Jesus is worried about. His concern is for them. We need to have better concern for others in a couple of ways. Remember what it says in Romans chapter 12, verse 15? It says, "Rejoice with them that do rejoice, and weep with those that weep." That's putting ourselves, that's empathy. Putting ourselves in our brothers and sisters' place. Excited for them when they are happy, when things are going great. We put ourselves in there and we rejoice with them. We have the joy of the Lord. We need to enjoy the joy of the Lord together. And yet, if they're in a place where they're under great heartache, we need to weep with them. Not like the Levite, not like the priest looking and walking down the other side, but to have that empathy one for another. You know what? Who portrays it the absolute best? Jesus. What is he going through? What is he about to face? And yet there he is, caring for his disciples who are going through nothing near what he is about to go through. Yeah, Peter's heart is going to be broken. And that breaks Jesus' heart, that Peter's heart is going to be broken. It is nothing in comparison with what Jesus is about to go through. It is nothing in comparison with that moment when he says, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? Peter's going to forsake Jesus, but it's not the same as God the Father forsaking Jesus. But there he is, with great compassion and great concern for others, giving us the example that we should follow. Rejoice with them that do rejoice, and weep with them that weep. Have a great day.